Podcast.
On the last episode, I talked about an ice storm in Nashville. What happens when you've got to get on the air, got to get an episode published, but you can't get to the studio, or you lose power. Well, here we are, almost a couple of weeks later. A lot of Nashville is still without power. What happens then? I'm going to talk a little bit more about those kind of things, talking about show management and booking, basically what keeps the machine rolling. That's on this episode of Big Podcast Playbook, the marketing podcast for podcasters. If you want to grow your podcast audience, get more people to your podcast, make more people care about your podcast, get sponsors to give you money for your podcast, have a better relationship with the people who do listen to your podcast, and a better relationship with sponsors, you are in the right place. My name is David Hooper. BigPodcast.com is the website. I'm in the middle of a series right now. These are the things that you must have to do all the things that I just mentioned. The first episode, core on mic skills. These are what listeners will feel immediately. That's in the feed, bigpodcast.com/subscribe if you want to get that. I did a second episode. It is about content and writing skills, what separates forgettable podcast from bingeable podcast. In the feed, bigpodcast.com/subscribe gets that. The third one, talked about production skills, the things that will keep you independent. Yeah, you know where it is. In the feed, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. That is where to get it. This episode, as I mentioned, show management and booking is the topic. What keeps the machine running? These are critical, but often ignored. We're going to talk about guest booking and prep. Going to talk about scheduling and consistency, even in a snowstorm, and talk about show planning. Let's get to it. Guest booking and prep. It gets to the point where people come to you, and I think that's great. However, when people come to you, you get what you get. So outreach, going to the people that you want, the people that are going to actually make a difference for your podcast, for your listeners, that puts you in charge. That's what I talked about in the last episode. That's the whole point of doing your own production, doing your own editing, not allowing somebody else to be in control of you getting to people. The middlemen, that's what we used to have in all sorts of media. Think about this. A musician works with a publicist. The publicist goes to a writer or a producer or an editor. You've got to write an article. You've got to record an interview. Then you've got to wait for that thing to get out. It took forever. These days, social media, go direct. And there's certainly pros and cons to that. But think about the power you have. You have that same kind of power when you do your own guest booking and prep. And a lot of big names in podcasting and radio do this. Don't leave it up to publicists. Don't leave it up for people to come to you. You go to them. The problem is, and all the sensitive podcast hosts, they're very susceptible to it. Outreach gets rejected. How do you make yours stand out? For one, you need to have outreach that isn't generic. We've all been there. That's why I'm laughing. We've gotten those, "Dear sir, I recently listened to an episode and found it to be excellent. You are the most excellent podcaster I have ever heard." It's a little bit off, maybe English isn't the first language of this person. And they're sending you these messages, you and everybody else. So you're thinking, oh, no, not this again. And you start to ignore it. The problem is when you ignore everything, you're going to miss some of the good things that come in. So how do you have outreach that doesn't sound generic? One, it helps if you're introduced via somebody that you know. And there's 6 degrees of separation, they say, in the world. There are probably 2 degrees in podcasting and maybe 1 degree in your niche. If you're really in your niche, really involved, knowing what you're talking about and participating in the market and the community that you're talking about, you probably have access to the people that you want. You may actually know them yourself. Go to them, man. Text, phone, email, not just a generic pitch. Go to them and say, here's what I've got. I think you would be a good match for it. Here's how you can benefit. If you are not in the community and already know these kind of things, you're going to want to do some pre-pitch research. That could be through LinkedIn. Hey, we got a mutual friend. Can you make this introduction to me? Hey, somebody said that you might be a good guest. Drop a name in there. Listen to other interviews that these people have done. Do your research before you pitch. Find out what excites them. Will it always work? No. You may be familiar with Seth Godin. He wrote the biggest business book of the last decade. Well, a few of them. Purple Cow, Tribes. I first was exposed to him back in the 90s, something he did called Idea Virus. I was working on a book, and I really wanted Seth Godin to be a part of it. I wanted him to do the intro for me, or maybe the forward, whatever. I just wanted his involvement. And the reason I wanted it, just to be flat out honest with you, is because it's going to help me sell books. So here's what I did to get his attention. There used to be something in marketing. They called it the dollar letter. If you're over 30, definitely over 40, you might remember these. You would get an envelope in the mail and it had $1 in it. And that dollar was there because they wanted you to do something. Look at what was in the envelope. Maybe they wanted you to fill something out like a survey. They used to do this with Arbitron. Fill out what radio stations you're listening to. Here are a couple bucks. And it was worth it for them to put a couple bucks in that envelope, and every single envelope they sent, not just yours, thousands and thousands of dollars, because they got better response from that money, even if some of that money got thrown away. So I thought, well, $1's not what it used to be. I'm going to do $1,000. And I sent Seth Godin an email with $1,000 attached, not to him, but to a charity that I knew he was involved with because I'd heard him talk about it on other podcast interviews. He'd written about it. I said, Seth, $1's not what it used to be. So here's $1,000 to this charity. I know you're involved with it. Here's the pitch. And the pitch was, I'd like you to write, I don't know what it was. I did the math on it. 1,000 words, 500 words, something like that. And I said, here's $5 or $10 a word. I'm going to give $5,000 to that charity if you will be part of this project. And he said, no, for the exact reason I wanted him to say yes. Getting his involvement was going to help sell this book. I was going to put the book on Amazon. It was going to have my name, David Hooper, the author, but it was also going to have his name, Seth Godin, forward by Seth Godin. You would click on his name when you're buying the best-selling business book of the last decade. You would also see my book, and he was onto it. He said, man, I would love to say yes to this. I can't do it for this reason. And that goes back to rejection. Rejection sucks. What I got out of it, though, was a good story. Sometimes you're going to get rejected. If it doesn't work out, you've got a good story. With that said, the best way to not be rejected, do your pre-pitch research. If you get somebody to say yes to your podcast, do your pre-interview research. I cannot believe the number of podcasts I hear where the first question, just tell me about yourself. Tell me a little bit about you. What do you want to know? Using me, for example, if somebody would ask me that question, I've been in the marketing and communications game since 1995. I was still in college. I have 20-something years in the music industry. For the last 20 years, I've done syndicated radio. Right now, I'm producing a daily show for SiriusXM. I've got hundreds and hundreds of podcasting and radio clients. I work with companies like Victoria's Secret when I was in the music business, Lightning Seeds, Run DMC, Marcy Playground. A lot of different bands, a lot of different clients. I worked for Red Bull, Universal Music. I've done film and TV production, MTV, Lifetime, VH1. I've done a lot of things over the years. What do you want to know? Don't lead them in with, tell me a little bit about yourself, because the people you want, they've done a lot. They're not just doing one thing. With that said, what they may want to do is pitch whatever their latest thing is. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Well, I've got this brand new book. It's called How to Adopt a Dog. And you're like, what? I didn't get you in here about your brand new stuff. I have this happen all the time with artists that I'm interviewing. Say I'm interviewing Bachman Turner Overdrive. Under 40, look it up. Bachman Turner Overdrive, they want to talk about their new stuff. Me, what my listeners care about, they want to hear about taking care of business. You ain't seen nothing yet. The hits they've been listening to for the last 40 years. Never, ever ask, tell me a little bit about yourself. No, don't do that. That's why you want to do your pre-interview research once you get that guest book. You also want to set expectations before you record. Here's what I expect you to do. You need a microphone, not the built-in microphone, an external microphone that sounds good. You need headphones. I produce a few shows for SiriusXM, and let me tell you this. This is embarrassing. Coast to coast wide, satellite tall. The main station that I work on over there, 1.3 million listeners per week. You would not believe the amount of people that pitch SiriusXM or somehow got involved that want to show up either on a phone or on a built-in computer laptop. Some of these guys are YouTubers or TikTokers. They're big in their niche, big on the internet. They want to move over into the real world. That's broadcast media, satellite media, something bigger than just a YouTube channel, yet they still show up like it's a YouTube channel. You're going to have that all the time in podcasting. It's just a podcast. It's just a chat. I was just talking to Aunt Mildred on Zoom. You're doing Zoom, so I can show up in the same way. No, you can't. Set expectations about what you want from these guests. To take it back to the topic of this, it's what's keeping the machine running, what's keeping your podcast moving forward. If you show up doing basically a call with Aunt Mildred, that kind of audio quality, you're going to get a call with Aunt Mildred results. If it's worth saying, it's worth recording. And if it's worth recording, it's worth recording right. Have standards. I don't care if somebody's famous on TikTok. I don't care if somebody's famous at anything. You got to have standards. With that said, yeah, there are a few people I joke around about Dolly Parton, Tin Can and a String. Okay, Dolly, we'll take that. You can get away with certain things when you are at a certain level. But what is a certain level? Taylor Swift, Oprah, Obama, whoever the top guy in your market is. You might make an exception for that person. For the run-of-the-mill person, no way. You don't need an interview that bad. Talked about this in the previous episodes for this series. This is why you want to be able to do a solo monologue podcast. This is why you want to be able to edit. You don't need these people. They need you. They want to come in and cosplay, pretend they're a big star by being on your podcast or any other kind of media you're doing. Maybe it's radio, maybe it's television. You don't need them. Real celebrities, real experts, they know their message is important. They know the image is important. They're going to show up correctly. Don't fool around with amateurs. If you're a pro, show up like a pro and expect other people to do the same when they're on your pro podcast. Next thing I want to talk about, scheduling and consistency. Man, you got to have release discipline. Sometimes, maybe a snowstorm, power outage, that can be a little bit rocky. Do not let your release discipline and fear of breaking the chain allow you to have a subpar audio quality or content quality podcast. Is every podcast going to be great? No. Is every podcast going to be your best? Absolutely not. By definition, no. The best is one thing, is something to strive for, but not everything, if you do consistent podcast releases, is going to be great. Still, you want to make it as good as it can be, the best you can do at the time. And you do need to have release discipline. It doesn't mean, well, I'm bored today, so I'm going to do a podcast. It can't be like that. But it also doesn't need to be, I've got to get this out every week. Get on Facebook. Hey, I need a guest. Who's available? And then get them on there and say, hey, tell me about yourself. That's not fair to your audience, man. And if you treat an audience like that, you're not going to have that audience for long. You may want to think about batching episodes. If you're somebody who's working a day job, your Monday through Friday is pretty busy, maybe you do 2 or 3 episodes on the weekends. Do it whenever you can. Then edit those one by one. Let them come out whenever. Batching helps. This is why guys like Steve Harvey, you hear him on the radio every morning, but you also see him on Family Feud or doing comedy shows. Those guys are batching. Some of these game shows, TV shows, they'll get in there 8 or 10 episodes a day. It's crazy. They run them through. They're basically live to tape. And you get better at delivering that live to tape experience the more you get behind the mic and do it. When I first started my syndicated show, this was 20-something years ago, I had everything written out. I had the questions written out, where I thought things were going to go. I had the intros written out. I had the outros written out. My guest this week is Joe Schmo. We're talking about whatever I thought I had just talked about. You're listening to Lightning 100 WRLT Nashville. We'll be back with Joe Schmo. We're going to talk about 1, 2, and 3 when we come back after this break. All that was written out. I wasn't that confident. I didn't have the experience. Now I've got the experience. How do you get that experience? Get behind the mic. People talk about good timing for having podcast success. Oh, that guy was lucky. Oh, call her daddy. She was just lucky. Right place, right time. Yeah, maybe. The COVID lockdown, that probably helped her. We didn't have anything to do. We're out there actively looking for things to do. Tiger King, remember that? Man, we went on lockdown. Tiger King was just released. Boom. It was everywhere. That's good timing. How are you ready for that timing? You keep showing up. You've got that release schedule, that release discipline. I talked about having my outline when I first started that syndicated show. Got the intros, got the outros, got the questions. You want to be prepared, but probably not that much. You've heard me talk about the Mike Tyson rule of podcasting. He says, everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the face. And that could not be more true when it comes to interviewing. You can ask a question, hopefully not, hey, just tell me about yourself. But that would be a good example of that. You think it's going to go one way, it goes a completely different way. You got to be flexible, man. You do need to plan, but don't overplan, because overplanning doesn't matter. You think it's going to go one way, and then it doesn't. Some people like to get questions in advance. Send me the questions in advance. No, even then, because then you're not listening. You're just performing. You're just delivering a script. People don't want to hear you read a script. AI could do that. They want to hear an authentic moment. You talk, the guest talks. You respond, the guest responds. That's good radio. That's good podcasting. Plan ahead without overproducing. So to summarize that, scheduling consistency, you want to have release discipline. You do want to batch episodes. That's going to help you have that release discipline in case something like the power goes out or you get busy, or maybe you're just having a bad day and you can't deliver your full self on the mic. That's okay. Batching your episodes, that will help that. You also want to plan ahead, not only episode to episode, but within the episode without planning ahead too much. Be flexible. Let's talk a little bit more about that. A season arc. You could argue that what I'm doing right now, this is the 4th episode of 6. That is a season. At the very beginning of this episode, I talked about the 3 things I'd already talked about. The first episode in this series, core on-mic skills, things listeners feel immediately. The second episode in the series, content and writing skills, what separates forgettable from bingeable. Because that's what we want as podcasters. That's going to make your promotion that much more efficient. You're out there doing the marketing, you're doing the promotion. When people actually give you a shot, you want to deliver with something that makes them want to continue to give you a shot from one episode to the next to the next. Don't just get them over to your podcast, to your website, to your feed. It's boring. The first question was, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. That host wasn't taking control. I'm not going to give him another shot. As a listener, that's wasting my time. The third thing I talked about, production skills, what keeps you independent, keeping that machine rolling. And this episode that we're on, continuing the thread of what's keeping the machine rolling, show management and booking. Coming up on the next episode, growth and marketability skills, why opportunities come to you, making yourself the podcast where not only are guests going to come to you, so you don't have to do this outreach that I'm talking about, but sponsors are going to come to you. And we're going to finish it up with the 6th episode, personal sustainability skills, what's going to keep you podcasting, or to flip that, what's going to make sure that you don't quit. Because we lose a lot of podcasters to burnout. We lose a lot of podcasters because they're putting energy into so many things like overplanning, things that don't matter. We lose a lot of them to exhaustion. I don't want that to happen to you. So that's the series. Back to what we're talking about now with show planning. That's a season. That's what you would call an arc. It's a complete experience. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and an end. Everything connects. A final thought, let's talk about knowing when the show needs a reset. Your podcast, even if it's great, it's going to get a little stale. People change, plans change, trends change, culture changes. Your podcast cannot keep doing the exact same thing that it is doing now and survive. Maybe you'll keep some people, but if you've got a hot podcast, you're not going to keep as many people as you've got now. You've got to constantly be changing with your audience. Sometimes you need a restart, something that shakes things up. Recently on this podcast, and when I say recently, look, man, it's Groundhog Day. It's another episode for me. Every day I wake up and do this stuff. So I don't even know when this was. But a few months ago, I changed the name of this podcast from Build a Big Podcast to Big Podcast Playbook. That's a reset. I was never really happy with the Build a Big Podcast name. It was great because it told you what I was doing and it told you what you were going to get. But at the same time, I've got a new book coming out. I'm going to be doing a lot of promotion with that book. I'm going to be bringing more people over to this podcast. Because of that, it was the best time for me to start fresh, or as I'm calling it here, give it a reset. That could be with your imaging. That could be with your format. As you grow as a podcaster, this is a very common trajectory. You're going to develop skills that allow you to do more things. Maybe what you do as a podcaster at the very beginning is do an interview show. Okay, cool. What happens when that gets old? What happens when the guests are recycling? What happens when you're asking the same question? You said everything you need to say via a guest. What happens when you want to do more? Your own knowledge has expanded. You're sick of being the guy who just interviews people. You want to be known for who you are. You get more comfortable behind the mic yourself. That's where monologues come in. Maybe that's a reset. You go from a guest-oriented show to a monologue, or flip that, a monologue-oriented show to a guest-oriented show, or maybe a panel show, or maybe a co-host. Every podcast needs a reset. Maybe that's imaging. Maybe that's a format change. Maybe that's a name change. Continue to do what works. Let that stuff that doesn't work fade away. And that's not just the content. That could be your schedule. That could be because you're changing. Think about a career music artist, somebody like Britney Spears, Taylor Swift, somebody who started as a teenager. As you get older, assuming anybody still cares, you are changing what you do. Think about Disney stars. This is very, very common. You start out as a kid actor, you're on the Mickey Mouse Club or whatever. And we could say Britney is somebody like that. People see you as a kid, you want to be known as an adult. What do? You do a reset. And you've got your own version of this with your podcast. You're known as something. Maybe it's not really who you are. It's just who you were comfortable with at the time. You're comfortable with more things now. Reset, man. Change things up. To fast forward a couple of episodes in the series, we're talking about not quitting. What keeps that podcast machine running? You. And you want to be able to be yourself on your podcast. So if you're changing, your content should change too. The issue we run into, and this is the trap of podcasting, we have built an audience as one thing. We move away from that. Your audience isn't always going to move away from that. Then what? Then it's a trap. And I see this all the time. I work behind the scenes with a lot of guys who have gotten themselves into some conspiracy theorist type stuff, right-wing stuff. It worked for them for a minute. It was fun. And then it went dark. And you are seeing a lot of people. I'll tell you a personal story. This is somebody that my wife worked with. I'm not going to say what her name is. She's got a top podcast. My wife is a photographer, by the way. This wasn't podcasting related, but this is a right-wing influencer, female. She was hired by a makeup company, a skincare company to do, I guess she was going to be the spokesman for it, a celebrity brand. A lot of times companies will bring in a celebrity because they are known. And this is what I talked about earlier. When you are known and when you are trusted, it's a great thing for a brand to associate with, and that helps them launch. That's why sponsors come to you. So this woman's in that situation, but she's gone way off the deep end, way into conspiracies, way into things that have completely overtaken her life. Anyway, they're at the photo shoot. And I'm going to describe a shot here, and this is something you would see in a makeup ad. You'll have a model, and she's got a bottle of makeup, a container, whatever. The focus of the camera is on that bottle. The model's in the back end. She's a little bit blurry, but she's holding the container out to you. The shot had her holding the container out, and one eye is covered by the container. One eye is not. Nothing special about it. It's a standard shot. Look at a woman's magazine, maybe a men's magazine. I don't know. But look at a magazine, you're going to see a shot like that. It focuses on the bottle. The model is just in the background, just a prop, basically. She sees the shot. She says, no, we got to redo that one. I can't do that pose because my audience is going to think I'm the Illuminati. That one eye thing, conspiracy theory, you can look it up. Regardless, the point being, she is trapped by an audience who's not going to allow her to do what she wants to do, what she's being paid for. They have put her in this box. They're comfortable with her in that box. She moves out of it. She loses all her money. She loses all her fame. She loses all her power. Nobody cares. And we see this all the time. This is why you get so many people sucked in behind the scenes. And again, I'm working in this business, man. I see these guys before the red light goes on. I know a lot of them personally. They do not believe what they're saying. They're there for the money. They don't have anywhere to go and they're trying to get out of it, but they don't know how. Do not get into that situation. It's complicated. I recognize that. What do you do when you've built a career on a certain skill? You've got a hard-fought audience that, for whatever reason, has gotten sucked up into something that you no longer believe or never believed in the first place, maybe. You were in on the joke. You figured they were. They're not in on the joke. They take it a little bit more seriously than you do. What do you do then? That's the kind of stuff that I talk about. If you want to talk about that with other people that are just as serious about podcasting and spreading messages via audio as you are, I've got a mentoring program and a community. It's called Big Podcast AMP. audio monetization program is what that stands for. You will find it at bigpodcast.com/AMP. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. I talked about the other episodes in this series, core podcasting skills that you need to grow your podcast, grow your audience, make people care about your podcast, develop a relationship with that audience where if you were to do something like this woman did, get sponsored by a makeup brand, you could sell that. Get sponsored by, who knows? There are all sorts of different kinds of sponsors out there. It's going to depend on your niche. I'm happy to work through all those things with you, get you those sponsors. You know, I told somebody this the other day. I'm sure I've mentioned it here. I think I mentioned it in the very first book that I have. It's called Big Podcast. You can find that on Amazon. The way that I got into radio, or at least syndicated radio, I walked in with a check. I had a sponsor that I had pitched on the idea before we went live, before I even went into the pitch meeting. I knew I had it coming up, but I wanted to walk in there with a check from a sponsor that said, this idea has been validated. This guy's going to take a shot on it. I hope you'll take a shot on me. And the way I was able to do that, by the way, I already had a relationship with the audience that I was speaking to. That is the power of relationships. That is the power of an audience. That is the power of a good idea and the skills to make that happen. Again, if you want to work on this stuff, bigpodcast.com/AMP, bigpodcast.com/AMP. You can find me and everything else that I've got at bigpodcast.com. I will see you on the next episode of this series here on Big Podcast Playbook. Thanks for listening. See you on the next episode.